Hey, everybody, welcome back to Client Side Chats. We're doing a series with Ron Gantt, a safety professional extraordinaire. How's that, Ron? That's a great way
Oh
to
man,
introduce you for this segment here.
I need a hat that says that or something.
There you go. That works well. But Ron, I know you're very well respected safety professional and a great speaker. And I'm really honored that you're spending the time with us to do this series with us. I know a lot of people are going to get a lot from it, even though this is kind of raw and we have a lot of fun with what we're talking about. But our topic now is actually talking about saving with safety. I mean, there's a lot of things you can think of that safety brings into the picture for savings, if you will. What are your thoughts on this?
I really am interested in this topic because I see it thrown out there as, we're trying to make a case for safety. And the thing that really frustrates me is how I don't feel like we're constructing a very good argument.
Oh,
Oftentimes. Because I feel like we're saying, oh, if we can prevent one accident, then that makes everything we do good. And so safety is always good because I can point to one accident. But logically, I don't think that actually works economically. I think, and the reason why is that we're if we could say, okay, this thing that prevented that accident cost X and the accident cost Y, then yeah, that makes sense. But then to extrapolate that everything done in the name of safety, therefore, is beneficial, that doesn't make any sense to me. Does that make sense what I'm saying right now?
yeah, that's interesting. I think what you're saying is that there isn't a simple link between a result and an action from safety that we all try to draw, which, quite honestly, there are ways that you can measure the link if you go through the process of actually measuring, and then you can determine what the impact of safety is. That's what you're driving at, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Even when we do that work and draw the link, it like sometimes the next step is to say, see, safety always is good business sense. And I don't think that's true. There's plenty of things that we can all think of that have been done in the name of safety that make no sense. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
no kidding.
That don't
Oh,
add
I
value.
can't wait to explore this. So like what? What kinds of things can you think of where something happened as a result of safety and didn't make business sense from that standpoint? Now I'm taking it as business sense. Now you can tell me, no, 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 I mean it more in a global sense or anything along those lines. What are your thoughts with regard to that?
Well, not to get too much into the weeds on
Yeah.
this. So, I would say one of the biggest problems we have in making this argument is that we're only looking at one side of the equation. We're looking at what is the cost of that negative event happening, but we're looking at the benefit of not implementing the safety thing. So we're saying here's the cost of implementing the safety measure, here's the cost of the accident. If we prevent one accident, okay, this number is bigger than this number, therefore it's you have a profit. We're not saying, hey, wait a minute, if we didn't implement that and spend that money could be spent somewhere else, so there's opportunity cost. Oh, and by the way, we also would be able to do the job faster without that safety intervention. You know what I mean? Like, so,
Right.
and I'm not saying that it doesn't make sense for other reasons to implement the safety measure.
Hmm.
But one of the things I tell people when they try to make this business case for safety in that way, like,
Right.
okay, if we prevent an accident, then because I think there are other ways that we can make a better case, but we'll get to that in a minute, I'm sure. But like, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. What happens if we have an intervention that we know will prevent a fatality, but we do the mathematical calculations and include all the variables and we figure out that it's not profitable? We just said that, well, it makes sense to do things in the name of safety. We then have to say, okay, well, I guess we're not going to be able to prevent that fatality because it doesn't make good business sense.
Ooh, wow.
And
People don't make decisions like that, do they?
I hope not.
I think that's a whole nother story too, because
Yeah.
I mean, we've had that debate internally as well, that that does happen where people are looking at
Mhm.
that from a cost benefit standpoint and then looking at it a risk. And can we take that risk and get away with one and not have that fatality? Then it occurs. It's like,
Yeah.
well, we just didn't get away with it. But in the end, we ended up saving, if you will, the money otherwise that would have been spent on this. It's kind of what you're talking about here is that we're saying by spending this money here, we prevent this kind of cost associated with an incident or an accident or a fatality, that kind of thing, whichever way you want to frame it, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely. And so I think So to me, I think a better way to frame this is,
Hmm.
what is the value we are bringing? Not in terms of the prevention of loss, that's part
Hmm.
of it, but there is value we can bring. So, it's actually something you said before we started recording,
Hmm.
that, hey, there's value in terms of some of these interventions actually save time. They actually make the job easier. They actually improve employee well-being. Even things like when employees feel less afraid, it's less risky, they go faster,
Hmm.
right? That's just a normal human. Like when I'm afraid, you slow down, you go into a scary room, like it's Halloween time, right? And so haunted
Yeah.
houses and stuff, we slow down, we start looking around, right? Whereas
Right.
if we feel comfortable, we just walk right in, and it's much more efficient. You know what I mean? Like if we can start to frame what we're doing in terms of, here's what we're giving the organization, rather than here's what we're saving the organization, or that alone, I feel like that's a better argument, that's harder to poke holes into, and it works with the organization rather than being this kind of separate thing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I would absolutely agree. I can think of a number of occasions where, as a professional, I've done exactly that, where the outcome metric of the intervention, if you will, that was there was to improve a customer satisfaction index, as an example, or to improve a time on task component, and maybe improve employee morale, which you can measure, or a climate survey or anything like that. That brings the value that you're talking about. It's not, the idea that, oh gee, I measured a better employee climate, so therefore safety is it. It's, what's the contribution to that? What's the contribution to, without this intervention, this is what we were doing. With this intervention, this is the betterment that we've received from that.
Yeah,
So yeah. I-
absolutely. I totally agree. And then you can even start to get into non-safety measures, like some of the things you talked about, right? Like
uh-huh.
you're starting to improve engagement, which is, not starting to, you can, that's one of the things you can actually do with really good safety interventions, right?
Hmm.
You can actually have employees feel more comfortable in their workplace, maybe feel more connected, maybe, and then you're not just improving a safety measure anymore, right?
Right.
You're making it a good place to work, which reduces turnover, which increases job satisfaction. And there's so many benefits that we can show that we give to the organization. But again, kind of back to the beginning point, I don't feel like
Yes.
we're framing the argument that way. We're framing it as, oh, I prevented one accident, therefore I'm good. And I feel like we do a lot more than that. And if you
Yeah.
ask any safety professional, there's a lot more that they do on a day-to-day basis. I just think we don't capture that stuff.
And I would agree with you. I think that's one of the things that, maybe I wouldn't say it's a frustration, but certainly a challenge that safety professionals feel. They feel like, hey, we do more than just spend this money, it saves that money on this end. It's really a combination of things. Sure, you can measure a financial outcome from that, but you have to measure it along the lines of what the operation is really measuring from that accounting standpoint. And you have to be able to relate that. But the benefit aspect that you're talking about, I'm thinking about total worker health with regard to this, and the wellness that you stated as well, because there is a lot of information. As you know, ASSP has been doing a lot of work in that area of total worker health and being able to show that value that a safety professional has, and coming up with that metric. That's the, I think, the thing that's very difficult. Now, I will offer here, at risk of getting us into yet another area of discussion, but that's great. That's what these things are about. Is a lot of safety professionals work in organizations or work with organizations that will have a business analyst. And one of the best things I've ever found was approaching the business analyst as a safety professional, saying, look, we're doing all these things here for the betterment of the organization. That means efficient outcomes and things along those lines. How can we measure this improvement? Is there a way to do that? And I tell you, if they can't come up with different ways where it's a truly valid measure, including things that aren't based on money or time or, just cost alone. So those are some things to really think about when we're talking about saving safety. Your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think that's brilliant. I love that. I mean, it fits in with my overall perspective as a safety professional that too often we try to do all the work ourselves. And as a safety professional, I know in my work, I've been a statistician, a marketer, all these things that I was never trained to do, but I just sort of figured it out and did as well as I could. It occurred to me a while ago, kind of to your point, I've never thought about it with business analysts. I think that's brilliant.
Ah,
That there's other people in the organization that probably are way better at this than I am. Maybe I just need to go and talk to them, rather than try to do it all myself. And so I think that's really good advice for people.
oh, good deal. Ron, I mean, you truly are a safety leader in our profession. I can tell you that. It definitely, you do think a lot more out there and you do talk about resilience and everything. And that's another aspect of saving with safety too, correct? From that standpoint?
To me, the concept of resilience is how do we enable the organization to keep operating even whether things are normal, abnormal, all the different conditions. And so when we start to frame the work we do as a value, like what as the value we're bringing to the organization, the things we're enabling to happen, it sort of shifts the mindset towards that resilience focus, right? Because now you're like, okay, I need to not just have a safety intervention that I can just say, okay, yeah, we just reduced the risk, but also I need to show, okay, we reduced the risk, and as a result, we got X, Y, and Z. And so I need to go out, and you need to understand operations. Then you need to go out and show that value, and so you start connecting dots in ways and coming up with interventions that connect dots in ways that I think are much more generative
Mm.
than maybe they would have been before. So I feel like it kind of gets in that mindset that like what people measure starts to become what they manage.
Hmm.
And if you start measuring the value you bring to the organization and how you're enabling it to continue functioning, I think inevitably you're going to start managing resilience as much as one can. You know what I mean?
Fascinating. That's great. That's a great, and that kind of brings almost to full circle here about what we were talking about in the beginning. Spending this saves that kind of thing. You're actually being able to measure what your contribution is. Exactly what you were saying. This is a better way to make it happen. I know in my work, I have found that to be the best value, where people actually are getting away from looking at the bottom line and looking at what they're really getting out of it, knowing that it's having that positive impact on the bottom line, which is what accounting does all along anyway. Accounting, the bottom line is the final result. What the whole counting functions all about is looking at where the resources are going and how that's improving the organization, which is why you sometimes, or I should say we as safety professionals, run into those frustrating answers of, no, you can't right now because we're doing this instead, just like you said in the beginning. So that's really good.
Yeah.
So any thoughts or any ideas here before we end our series on this one here with regard to resilience and how you can show that savings, that safety saves?
I mean, I guess I would just emphasize what you said, earlier about going and finding the people in the organization who already are analyzing how the organization is adding value, and see how you can align what you're doing with that and how they can inform what you're doing, based on what they're doing. And I feel like that's a really great place to start.
Cool. All right. Ron, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Look forward to the next series
Yeah.
and talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Bye for now.